Welcome class to Important Stuff 101. I'm Professor Surdy, and today we'll be talking about American sports culture. So hopefully some of you have seen the recent fight between Floyd Mayweather and Logan Paul, who's a YouTuber, and Mayweather actually came out of retirement for this fight, and together they accrued $60 million of revenue between them. So it's a little bit funny because neither of them are actually professional fighters anymore, but they still managed to make all this money, and we're going to go into how the American culture became the way that it is, and this stuff like this is possible. So first of all, we're going to talk about the actual origin of sports. So that goes all the way back to colonial times. Pretty much sports and gambling came together from England when the British came over to America, and gambling and sports have always been a part of the American culture, and they've even been interested in stuff like Indian lacrosse, for example. And why was sports so successful? Well, it was because sports allowed the indulgence of three separate factors that the American public can kind of come together and have fun with all three aspects. So what are these aspects? They are gambling, politics, and peak human ability, the interest in that. So the first one is gambling. And like I said before, even in colonial times, there was lots of gambling in sports. Less sports, more gambling, stuff like for the lower classes, stuff like bull baiting, cockfighting, and just overall fights. Bull baiting is when you put a bull into a ring with a certain amount of dogs, and people could bet on either how long the bulls would last or how many dogs they could kill, or if the dogs would kill the bull. And this came along with a lot of drinking, men being men, and gambling, a lot of gambling. And then the elite really focused on horse racing, and that was seen as more of like an upper class thing because they had to, support the horses, actually participate in the sport themselves and practice and stuff like that. And gambling was actually so prevalent during the early American history that even with the Victorian era, where it was seen as an illegitimate form of accruing money, there were still a lot of underground rings, and there was always gambling in American culture, even if it wasn't seen as legal or as the right thing to do in the Victorian era, as anyone of upper class was frowned upon. And this lasted from the 1830s to 1901, but as we'll see, it kept going. The next aspect is political and racial tension and media. So one example of this is the Great Fight between American Tom Hyer and Yankee Sullivan, who's actually Irish born. And a lot of the media with this is the promoters promoted this fight as American versus Irish, and Yankee Sullivan's name, Yankee wasn't his real name, but he took that name on, and the fight was between who deserved that Yankee title. So Tom Hyer was actually a Yankee born in America, and Yankee Sullivan was actually Irish born. So a lot of the media was putting them against each other that way. And then things like the Telegraph, and this sparked up media, so newspapers, and this allowed the general public to actually indulge and be interested, even if they didn't really care about sports or about betting. It was in all the newspapers, and this led to magazines we know today like ESPN and Sports Illustrated. And the last one is the interest in the human form, or peak human ability. So this is actually a picture of Yankee Sullivan. As you can see, he's kind of exaggerated. Obviously, he probably wasn't this muscular. He was a fighter, a lot of endurance. Bouts back then used to last, up to 20 rounds, and basically till whoever couldn't even fight anymore, let alone like not just be knocked out, but couldn't stand or anything like that. And then in addition to this, we have things like muscular Christianity, which came about in this time. And this was actually the first time where the government agreed that sports and athletics were a good thing. So muscular Christianity was the idea that because the human body was given by God, that it was a noble thing to do to participate in sports and athletics and actually go into the human body and try to improve it. So just a little recap. This is Muhammad Ali and Wilt Chamberlain. Without these three aspects of sports, all of America could indulge in these three main things that are very human and human nature that everyone wants to indulge in. They could bring these things together, and this led to things like Las Vegas and gambling. And we even see with the politics idea, we see a lot of athletes protesting in media now. And that's that's a big thing. We see a lot of story arcs now that we used to not in the media. And then for the human form, we are so interested in how far we can take the human body. So things like the Olympics, everyone's so interested in things like Usain Bolt and bodybuilding, stuff like that. So this is just kind of the origin and why American sports is such a big part of our culture today.